Hey everybody, and welcome to the first lesson of the fourth quarter. Let's learn a little bit about portrait photography. Well, hello everybody, and welcome to another video. Hopefully you've been enjoying the beautiful weather like I have. Today is April 26th, if you're watching this on a Monday, but very big week because this is the first week that you guys are potentially back in school for some of your classes. Now, elective classes, like I was saying before, will continue to be CDL classes. So that means that I'm going to keep posting videos for you to watch every Monday with an assignment and a weekly quiz. So we're going to keep rolling with this. Like I said in last week's video, this week is going to be our final week of portrait photography, and then we're going to get into video for the remainder of the semester. And I'm hanging out in my treehouse to enjoy some more of this amazing, fabulous spring weather. Plus I've been fixing it up lately, so I feel like I should get some use out of it. My kids are getting a little too old to enjoy it, so someone might as well. Let's start talking about how to shoot a portrait photograph. So first off, what you want to do is you want to find a background that you think looks good out of focus. Now, what's important about a portrait photo is that all the focus is on your subject, and more importantly is on the eyes of your subject, and then the background is just something that's really pleasing. So some of you maybe have used an iPhone or an Android that has some sort of portrait mode on it, and what that does is that actually takes two photos, one of your subject just focusing on their eyes, and then the other is of an out of focus background, and it combines them together to give it this portrait-like quality. Now, if you have access to a DSLR or a mirrorless camera, I really want you to try using it because you're going to see the difference in this video example that I have for you when you use that type of camera, because then it's not actually simulating a blurred background, it actually blurs the background for you. So pretty cool. All right, what you're gonna do is you are going to frame them using the rule of thirds if possible. Now, when you think about a traditional portrait frame, we're talking about a vertical frame, right? So the rule of thirds can also use the top horizontal line for the subject's eyes. So you can be thinking about that. You can also sometimes have them a little bit off to the side, looking into open space. You can even shoot a portrait in landscape mode where it is a sideways frame. So there are a variety of ways that you can do it. Try shooting both ways for this project. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna make a little collage out of these things, and it'll kind of help to have both orientations. All right, so try and make your subject laugh and smile. If you're going to be taking pictures of a person, I always get them to laugh and then take their picture while they're laughing, because a forced smile comes across as a forced smile. That's a little trick for you. The other thing is, I also never tell people when I'm actually taking the picture. I tell them like, okay, say cheese, click, but I'm actually clicked 2 or 3 times before that. And I shoot hundreds of pictures when I'm out shooting portraits, and then that way I have my best 10 or 15 at the end of that. So if you are using a DSLR or a mirrorless camera or any camera with automatic settings, you want to try and use Aperture Priority mode. I'll explain that a little bit in the video that you're going to see. And but come to office hours with your device. I'll show you how to do it, and you will be amazed at how professional your photos will look just by having this really shallow depth of field. Okay, so both of these photos here, hopefully the wind isn't affecting this too much. Both of these photos are some of my senior portrait clients that I've taken over the years. And you can see in both of them, we've got a nice blurred out background. All right, so we're gonna jump back in time to December when I filmed this same lesson for my fall semester. So that's why I'm kind of all bundled up. But let's take it away to Mr. Oliver, back in time. Max, there you are. I've been looking for this guy everywhere, and since he's down by the river, it's a perfect place to talk about how we're gonna do some portrait photos. But we're gonna go over all the techniques that you need to take a great portrait. So I'm using my stuffed animal Max. You may recognize him from The Little Mermaid, and the reason is because he's not going to move, and I can focus on all of the subject techniques that I'll want to be using. Now, if you're taking a picture of your own pet, be forewarned, it is going to be a challenge to keep them in the same place in case they're trained really well. Maybe a family member or a brother or sister would work even better because they're going to be able to listen to your instructions. But I'm going to walk you through all of the different techniques for what you need to do in order to take a great portrait. You're going to take those pictures, you're going to put them into a PhotoP project, and you're going to make either a portrait collage or some sort of holiday card, whatever you'd like to make, and then you're going to hand that into this assignment as well as taking the weekly quiz. So let's jump right in to how to take a good portrait photo. All right, so in a portrait photo, you've probably seen before some portraits where the backgrounds are either completely out of focus and you have no idea what they are. That's called a neutral background. You have the background that is out of focus, but you can still identify what it is. That's another thing that you see in a lot of different portraits. And then also you'll see some compositional elements such as leading lines or foreground objects, and we're gonna get into all of those. So the first one that I wanna look at here is having my background out of focus, but still be able to tell what it is. So being down by the river, I've got some cool reflections here and I've got some trees in the background, and I'm gonna try and shoot these with both my DSLR and with my smartphone. Now, what I'm gonna do with my smartphone is I'm gonna do two different things. I'm gonna use portrait mode for some of them because portrait mode actually takes 2 photos whenever you use it. In portrait mode, it takes 1 picture of your subject in focus and it takes 1 picture of your background out of focus. So that's really kind of a cool technique. Now, I know not everyone has that option, so I'm also gonna show you how to take that just with a traditional smartphone camera so that you're just having one thing. Now, if you're really close to your subject, the background is gonna fall out of focus anyway, so we'll look at those. But then also, I will show you some pictures that I'm gonna take with my DSLR. What I'm gonna do for those, or I'm gonna have the aperture as wide open as I can. Now, it's pretty bright out here, so I'm not gonna have it completely open, but you'll still get the idea of how I can throw my background out of focus for these shots. So let's take a look at some of those. So one example of a portrait that you're gonna wanna try is a neutral background. So here's a picture that I actually took of my daughter for the yearbook for her school. And what I did is I took this portrait in front of a background that is completely neutral. So this picture looks like it could be some sort of studio backdrop, but it's actually just a wall in my house. Now, what's important about doing this type of photo is that you don't put your subject right up against your background. If you do, everything kind of looks smushed together. So there's probably 10 feet between her head and the wall, which makes the wall look nice and soft. And then your neutral background can really support your subject. All right, so first off, when I'm taking this picture of Max here, and I just want maybe the river as the background, I'm gonna see what that looks like. I am going to use a mode called AV mode. Now, if you have a Canon camera, AV mode is the aperture priority, meaning how much light lets in through the front of your camera here, and you just controlling that. So what I'm gonna do is try and have the biggest aperture I can, which is actually the smallest number. All right, so let me see what that looks like as I take a picture of him. So I'm gonna try and focus on the eyes of my subject. That is always important. Now, as I try and take this photo, it is gonna be really hard in this light to have that aperture all the way open. So I'm gonna do the best that I can with it. Now, actually, that's gonna work out just fine. I think it's gonna look pretty cool because he's gonna be in focus while my background is nice and out of focus. All right, so now when I take this photo, the background is much closer. But I'm thinking about how I'm framing him up. His eyes are in focus. I've got trees on one side, I've got the river on the other. They're a little more in focus than in my last shot. Yeah, I like that. I think that turned out as a pretty good portrait of our boy Max. All right, now I want you to try a photo with an out of focus element. So for one portrait, you should frame your subject in front of a background that looks good out of focus. Now, what works well for this, especially if you're using a DSLR, is that you want to go ahead and focus on something up close, like maybe your hand, right? I'll hold out my camera and I'll focus on my hand. And then without changing the focus, I'll take my hand away and just look at the blurred out background and find something that looks pleasing. So that's a cool little trick that you can do for trying to do that. If you're not sure, you always just do a test shot. You could do a portrait mode on your hand, right? If you're going to be using portrait mode on your phone, and take a shot of it. It'll show you what that background looks blurred out. You can go into the sliders later and edit it to change it. And then if you like that backdrop, you can use that as your portrait. Okay, now it's okay for the viewer to be able to make out some details in the background, but the focus should be on your subject's eyes, right? The best as possible, and they should be well lit, right? Like in this video right now, I'm not perfectly well lit. I'm kind of in the shadows, but hanging out in the treehouse I figured was more important than being a perfectly lit video. So the next shot I'm gonna try here is the leading line shot. So notice how I've got the riverbank that flows along in my photo. I think it's gonna make an interesting line along the side of Max's head here. So I'm gonna set Max up on this rock. Hopefully he doesn't take a dip in the river. Otherwise my daughter might be a little bummed out. This is actually my wife's back from the 80s because this is Max from Under the Sea. Let's not go under the river, okay? All right, let me set him up and try another shot. So in each of these shots, you can see how the line of the riverbank really draws your eye into Max, and the tree behind him really works nicely to frame the subject. All right, so the next portrait that I want you to try is a leading lines portrait. Now, for one portrait, you should try and incorporate leading lines. And here's a selfie that I took in front of the school, I think this was in September or October. And this phone was just taken with my cell phone, and it wasn't portrait mode. Now, you notice that if you look at the details on the road, the further you travel away from me, the more that's gonna fall out of focus. Now, a camera naturally does this. If you get really close to a camera, right, the focus will be on you, and then everything behind you will start to look more out of focus. As you get further and further away from that camera, though, everything will start to look more in focus, and that's gonna be the true... Now, this will apply regardless of what mode you're using on a camera. You'll get that background to start to fall out of focus. Now, this is gonna happen regardless of what camera or what mode you're using. The further you can get a subject away from a background, the more contrast of focus that you'll see in the shot, okay? So, all right, a leading lines portrait is something I want you to try. Now, just because it's a portrait photo doesn't mean you have to be held this way. In fact, it's a great idea to take all of your photos both in portrait and in landscape so that you get a variety of framing here. All right, so I think I got some pretty good shots, both with my cell phone and with a DSLR. Remember, I'm taking them both ways. Now with any of these, what's really important is keep those eyes in focus. That's the most important part of a photo. We're gonna try portrait with a foreground object first. Then we're also gonna try a themed portrait. Now, I don't know if I have much of a theme for him, but I'll work on it. Let's try our next shot. All right, now try a foreground portrait. For one portrait, you should try to have some foreground elements to help create depth. Notice how my subject's hands are out of focus, creating depth in the shot. You could have any object in the foreground, just make sure to keep the focus on the eyes. So this could be someone peeking out behind something is a really good way of doing this. Yeah, so try a foreground element. It just helps add depth. Just like what we talked about when we first got started about using the rule of thirds and creating depth. Really shoot to have depth in your photos. It makes them start to come alive. All right, you may be asking yourself, why is Mr. Oliver laying down for the shot? Now, the reason why I'm laying down for this one is so that I can get the eyes of my subject. So I want to be right at Max's level. So if you're taking a picture of your lizard or your dog or cat, get down on the floor and take a picture of them. It's going to look a lot better. Okay, for this next technique, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna have a foreground element that's out of focus. So I've got this little stack of rocks that I want in the frame right here, you'll see in the shot. And I'm gonna get down on the ground so I'm level with Max. I can get him in. All right, Max, let's go. All right, for our final portrait, I want you to try and do a themed portrait. Now, this was a holiday themed portrait because I did these in December with my daughter and my cat, and we were in front of the mantelpiece all decked out for the holidays. So you're probably not gonna do a Christmas or a winter holiday theme, and that's totally fine. But maybe a springtime theme. Maybe it's gonna be a sports theme. If you have a little brother or sister that plays a sport, you know, go ahead and put them in their uniform and hold a basketball and have an out of focus basketball hoop behind them. Just get creative. I want to see what you can come up with. So try and do one of those. All right, so for your last portrait, I want you to try and do it themed. So because it's December, I figured a lot of you might want to do holiday themed or holiday cards, just like the example that you saw in my slides. But Max, you know, knowing him, he wanted to be in front of a fire hydrant. So I don't know, that's just Max. So I'm gonna see if this one works. I need something to prop Max up on. Ooh, my backpack might work. So let's see if that gets him high enough up off the ground. Maybe if I get down low. So I'm gonna have Max on the bag, and then me down low, looking at, so let's try just shooting it. You know, actually, after looking at all my portraits, I realized that my first one that I thought was a completely neutral background, you could actually see a lot of the river behind it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do another one, and this is just from perspective. I'm gonna be looking down. So the grass behind me here is gonna serve as the background just by being a little bit higher up than my subject. And I should be able to pretty much just put him in front of a completely green world. Lots of different ways to work on your portraits. The secret word is sunglasses. On a bright sunny day, it's a good idea to wear sunglasses because sunglasses, you know, help you out. All right, sunglasses, that's your secret word. Don't forget to put it on the quiz. Back to you, Mr. Oliver. All right, so here are two other portraits that I have. One of my daughter, one of my cat. Excuse the wind if it's going crazy. You know, there is no term for that noise you hear with wind interfering. I've been looking on the internet. If you can find it, let me know because I'm curious. Mr. Lippert and I, the 7th grade science teacher, were talking about this, and we decided to coin the term windurance, right? Because it's the wind that's a hindrance. So yeah, maybe this word will catch on, so give it some traction. All right, windurance. All right, both of these photos, I like to show the settings that I have with my photos so that if you are using a manual settings camera, you can see both of these are at f2.8. That means my aperture is super wide open for the lens. One is at 100 millimeters, one is at 50 millimeters. And different focal lengths are going to give you different amounts of compression. So even though the aperture is the same for both of these, look how blurry the background is on the one with a cat versus my daughter over there. That's actually in the bus lane at Happy Valley in the fall, maybe 2 years ago. But you can see that you get different amounts of compression based on how far zoomed in you are. So if you get a chance to take my class in person, we will be putting on different lenses of different focal lengths and trying out different compressions to see what we can come up with. And yeah, so I hope, quick plug, please take Intro to Photography or Intro to Video next year if you haven't done so already, or take Photography in Yearbook or Hair and TV. So enough of my shameless plug for my classes. Let's move on. But before we do, I want to show you one unique portrait that I took, which is of my daughter and one of our chickens. And you can see that she is actually the out of focus background. So I've kind of flipped this portrait on its head here, but the focus is still on the little chick's eyes. So really that's what the portrait is. And the background becomes my daughter, the chicken tender. No, that sounds, we don't want to think like that. The chicken raiser, the chicken farmer, I don't know what you want to say. All right, let's get into the assignment. So what we're going to do is we are going to create a Google drawing with 3 to 5 different pictures in it. Now, if you're feeling daring, or if you took my class in the fall and you'd like to make this in PhotoP, that would be awesome. PhotoP is a great tool. It's kind of complicated, and I'm not going to require anyone use this because really you're just going to be creating a JPEG. But if you want to be able to create a higher resolution image, you're going to probably want to use PhotoP instead of Google Drawings. All right, when you create a project in PhotoP, it is a layer-based editing tool, and the layers that are listed on the top appear on the top layer of your design, and you can drag them around to change the order. So I encourage you to experiment with this. Totally not required though. If you ever think that you might be interested in learning a little bit about Photoshop, this is a free version of, similar to Photoshop that you can work with, and you can do all sorts of things with it. When you're finished with either your Google drawing or your PhotoP, you have to download it as a JPEG. So I want you to have at least 3 portraits on this drawing, but you may want to include a background and a title, things like that. So when you're finished, you're going to do 2 things. If you're using PhotoP, save it as a PSD. That means it is an editable file that you can reopen, okay? Very, very important. If you're using Google Drawings, it will automatically save in your drive as a Google Drawings project, okay? But then what you'll need to do is export it as a JPEG. So how you'll do that in PhotoP is you're going to hit File, Export as a JPEG, and then this new dialog box comes up where your quality, I think it's going to be by default set to 70%. Go ahead and make it full quality. So move that slider all the way to the right and then hit Save, and it will save a JPEG of your drawing for you, of your design. Go ahead and then attach that to the assignment in Google Classroom. If you're using Google Drawings, then you're just going to hit File, Download as a JPEG, and you'll have a JPEG either way. So use whichever program you're more comfortable with. Both are great tools to use for this kind of project. All right, so remember, we've got 5 different types of portraits to try, and you're gonna put at least 3 of them into your PhotoP. So you've got a neutral background that's out of focus. You've got a background that's out of focus, but you can still tell what it is. You've got a leading lines photo, right? You have a foreground photo, and then you try a themed photo. So have fun with it this week. It is a brand new semester, and you all have a 100% in my class right now, right? So in order to keep that 100%, you're gonna have to do a couple things. One, make sure you do the secret word quiz. The secret word quiz is going to be posted as a separate assignment, as it has been all semester long. Go ahead, just select the correct secret word. You can't miss it. And go ahead, get that secret word in, hit submit on the quiz. You can only take it once, so make sure you know the secret word. The next thing that you're going to need to do is make sure this assignment has been attached as a JPEG to this. So you will have your 100%. If you make a JPEG that has at least 3 pictures on it. So go ahead and make a JPEG with at least 3. If you hand me 1 picture, you will not get full credit with just 1 picture. So make sure you have between 3 and 5. You make a collage. You could call it the portrait collage if you'd like. You could put a title. You do what you want, but go ahead and make that design and hand it in to this class. So yeah, I think that's it for this video. Hopefully you enjoyed the treehouse edition of this class. And yeah, so never stop creating, and I'll see you in the next video. All right, let's not drop my computer when I'm climbing back down.